school didn't have naturally speaking, the school didn't have the finances.
A very heated meeting. It was very large with the parents.
So it was every morning, I think it was at 10 o'clock in the morning, we stopped and we had prayer and asked the Lord to provide the money.
He's been so faithful. The fun memories are those late nights, early mornings. Mr. Fillmore with rags tied around his head, painting, people running up and down the hall with a broom, just plain silliness.
I did not envision that it would be 2 facilities and an activity center.
No, absolutely not, because we started so small.
I mean, if you realize we started out with the first 2 halls in that building.
We never dreamed it would be what it is.
My name is Barbara Osfeld, and I am the administrator of Community Christian School. My career as a teacher began in Oklahoma City, and I started there in an elementary school. I was there several years, and then stopped for a few years to have my children and to be home with them. At that time, I was contacted by a minister there in Moore, and asked me about starting a private Christian school. To which my answer was, I don't know how to start a school. That's not what God called me to. But after a 24-hour period of pacing the floor and talking to Mr. O and saying, what should I do? Of which he said, I'm not telling you what to do, you know what to do. So at that time, I surrendered to start a Christian school. And over the years, there were different places that I did go, and we began a school, and God blessed it each time. In 1986, there was some definite indications that maybe we needed to leave where we were, and I'm talking we as me and Mr. O, and to see what God had for us.
Several of us were teaching at a particular Christian school, not Community Christian School, and we left that school based on our convictions and what we saw going on.
Many times as the school became prosperous, the church wanted to become a part of the financial part of it. Sometimes the church was supportive of you using their classrooms, other times they were not.
Well, from my perspective, the beginning of CCS happened about 5 or 6 years before CCS came about. We were together as a group at Eastern Avenue in the early 80s. The preacher there wanted to start a school, so he talked with Barbara and they started it. And about a year later, my wife came aboard at Eastern Avenue. We were there for a year or 2, and then the preacher, as always happens, he's got another idea of how school ought to be, so we had to move on. So we moved on after he more or less got rid of us, and then we went to Dayspring. And we were there at Dayspring for a year, and sure enough, that preacher got into some problems, and that school sort of dismissed, and we went to Ranchwood. And then Ranchwood had the same problems with the preachers. The preacher starts a school, but that's not really his calling.
Well, Mrs. O's scholastic transiency brought her to CCS. First started working at a Christian school when the pastor of the church we were attending to asked her if she would start a school. Started one. Started with probably 45 to 50 students, and she made the big sum of $5 per week per student. After a couple of years, school had grown to nearly 300. The preacher fired her. She went to another school, worked there for a year. At the end of the first year, and her contract wasn't renewed. She went to another third school. At the end of the year, we left and decided we wanted an independent Christian school, one that was free from any of the pastoral influences that we'd seen. Some parents, a lot of the parents left the school. We found property, started an independent school, started with 75 or 80 students, and it's grown to what it is today.
At that time, there was a lady working in the cafeteria, and she came to me, and her name was Dolly Canary. And she said, Mrs. O, I have a word for you from the Lord, I believe. And I said, what is it? And she said, you are to start an independent Christian school. I said, thank you very much, and walked away thinking, not me. But as the year progressed and things happened, I realized I could no longer stay in the place where I was. Well, I had had the opportunity, and I still go back and thank the Lord, because the first person that ever called me and got me into this was under the covering of a church. But it is so important that things remain consistent. I taught at 3 different Christian schools. I started 2 others besides CCS. We began the school in 1986 with a group of parents and founders. The founders of the school, the original, were Mr. and Mrs. Spence Weimer, Mr. and Mrs. Carrie Fillmore, Mr. and Mrs. John McDaniel, Mr. and Mrs. Jerry Stevens, and Mr. and Mrs. Osfeld.
And then there were several instrumental parents, Terry Brown, Bob Brown, Sandra Jackson and her husband Randy, Linda Oxen and her spouse Russell, C.D. Jones and his wife.
But, you know, there were 5 families that were here from the beginning and still represented here. And we all knew each other before, and just CCS has been, for the most part, a pretty closely knit family over the years.
Well, I was a group of parents, one of the group of parents that wanted to start a school, a Christian school that was independent from a church. And that was just a desire God gave several families, and that's how it all started. We started looking for a building and praying, and God just directed us to where we should go.
There were several of us that had the conviction that we need our children in a good Christian school. God led, and as we followed His leading, He brought us right here to this building, and it all began.
My name is Leanne Weimer, and I first met the Osfelds and the Fillmores and the other friends through a church connection in Moore, probably in 1985-ish. We began interacting. I was homeschooling a group of kids at that time that had been involved in another school that closed, and Mrs. O came and watched to see what I was doing, and so when they were ready to start a school, they invited me to come along with them. I was kind of a newcomer to the group. I remember sitting in the living room of somebody in Moore, I don't even remember whose house it was, and we talked about it, and we said, we should have a school, and we said, well, where should we do it? And I said, we should go to Norman, because Moore had several Christian schools, and so I said, let's start looking around in Norman for property that we can use. So that's kind of where I got started with them.
The school started, Mr. O and I were out driving around looking for property and just seeking what God would have us to do. And there was a nucleus from the school that we were at that wanted to go with us wherever we went. So I remember the day that we pulled up into the parking lot here, 3002 Gross Drive, and the Lord impressed upon me this is where the school is supposed to be. At that time, I looked at Mr. O and said, this is where the school is. And he said, how do you know that? And I said, I just know it. So, of course, there were steps to take. We contacted a realtor to ask about the building where the elementary school is. And at that time, there was a school in there already. It was George Lynn Cross Academy out of OU. So I contacted Gene McCowan, and I said, Gene, we are interested in possibly purchasing a third of that building, of this building. And he said, lady, you're crazy. They don't sell thirds of buildings. And I said, they do if God's in it. So he came back to us a few days later and he said, well, I can't believe it. I got a hold of Mr. Cross, who lives in Houston, and he said he would sell a third of the building. So at that time, the third that we would have purchased would have been the George Lynn Cross Academy. So that was 37 years ago, and we needed money for a down payment, approximately $50,000.
So we begged, borrowed, did everything but steal to try to come up with $50,000. And when we'd exhausted all our resources, we had $20,000. And I was working with a man that I knew had money. I called and asked if he would loan us $30,000. Gave him a little bit of explanation about why, and he said, oh, I don't need to know why. Do you want the money? And I said, yes. He said, okay, I'll loan it to you. Ms. O and I went to get it, and we had a paper all made out, had the school seal on it and everything, because we already had a school seal, even though we'd only been in existence a couple of weeks. But everything ready to tell him we would pay him back and ask him if he wanted paperwork. And he said, no, either you'll pay me back or you won't, and wrote us a check for $30,000. So we had the $50,000 for the down payment. And Gene McCowan, who was the representative for the owners, never thought we could raise $50,000, but they followed through on it and sold us the third of the building.
The first challenge that we faced, obviously, was the money. When we started the school, we didn't have the money to purchase the building, so we each went to our relatives, to our parents, to our friends, to our grandparents, and asked them if they would like to invest in what God is doing. And we sold some of our silver that we had been saving for our retirement or whatever. So we sold our silver and we took that money and we invested it in the school. And because we did that, I believe that God was faithful to provide for our own children. They were healthy, they were strong. He met every need that we had. And we depended on him so much in those days because we knew we didn't have the money to do it. We had to have him to provide. So it was wonderful to see answers to prayer over and over again.
The first interest meeting, if people were interested, we held at a cafe in Moore, and we just all came together and sat around and talked about it. And there again, God had placed just the exact people that were supposed to be there, and their thing was, Mrs. O, we followed you to the school, and we will follow you to wherever God leads the next school. And it wasn't Miss O, I realized that. But they were willing to discuss it openly and just say, we're going with you. So there wasn't any voting or anything, it's just that we're going with you. And so sure enough, I'd turn around and there they were. So, yeah. And I'm friends with a lot of those people still.
God provided that. The first year, the teachers didn't get paid. We just worked hoping and praying that God would provide. We wanted to make certain the school was able to be run well and not take anything away from the students. So while we were very dependent on having a salary, it was God that provided and met our needs. So my husband was employed out at Tinker, so that helped, but it was still like living on one salary. So that was a challenge, but later we were able to be paid back at a time, a little bit at a time. So that was God providing.
The main thing I think it's meant to Mrs. O and to me, Mrs. O more, is that it's given us a place of service. When the school started, I had a job working for an oil company. I tell people that I was underworked and overpaid, making way more than I should have been making for the job I was doing. But in 1990, school was 4 years old, and the company sold the little division that I was working for and offered me a job, same pay, same grade, but it was in the middle of Kansas. And Mrs. O was in turmoil about the school. Are we going to move? Are we not going to move? And so I finally got peace and told her, you know, I have a job, you have a ministry. We're going to stay here where the ministry is.
It's been a blessing to be here. Never was about money for us. I mean, I just enjoyed doing something that kids would benefit for, you know, for years to come. And so I've seen from years now that there's been a lot of beneficial times since we've been here, you know, for a lot of kids.
Where the junior high is now, we got possession of that building 6 weeks before school was supposed to start, and it had been a gymnastics chalet, and so it was mainly just a big open space. So we had to build all the walls, do all the plumbing, the wiring, heat and air, everything. And we did it nearly all with volunteer labor, which is always a challenge. But the night before, we had to have our final inspection on Friday afternoon. There was one thing left to do that I didn't see any way we would get it finished in time for the inspection. Spence Weimer said, I've got to leave for work in 2 or 3 hours, whatever it was, and said, anything that I can do before I leave. And I gave him the job of building the transitions for the air conditioning between the plenums and the ductwork because of the way things had gone because of our construction schedule. And I thought, there's no way he can do it. And he came back before he left for work and said, I'm finished. And I went and looked at it, and everything Spence does is done to perfection. And I looked at it and thought, boy, it looks great.
Parents came in and we scrubbed that building. We did the best we could with it for what we had in the time that we had to do it. And we worked and we had more fun. We laughed. We were here till midnight. We were here till later. We would bring sack lunches and things in the evenings, and we would work together. So there was a lot of closeness.
I used to come up here and when we first started, and I'd come up here after work and work until 10, 11, sometimes 12. Just painting. When we started the second phase, you know, we had, it was all new, so it was all new sheetrocking and tape and bedding, and framing the walls and stuff like that. And so I did all that stuff. I've been around in that construction for years, and so I knew how to do it.
What I remember more than anything is, because I didn't have a skill set, obviously, at that time, about the only thing I could do was ride a mower. And everything was so grown up around here because the building had just been neglected for a while. So what I remember more than anything was riding a mower, trying to get so much of the tall grass cut down. And then, of course, just being a kid, you're the gopher. You know, whatever the adults want, you go get it and just do whatever you're told to do, help out that way. Everything. I mean, literally painting, cleaning carpets, getting bathrooms ready. It was just everything. I mean, you know, lights had to be changed out. You name it. The building was disgusting whenever we moved in, and so everything had to be done.
I think the fond memories come from the unity of the people that were going forward. The fond memories are people that says, I will teach, whether I get paid or not, because I want my kids to have a Christian education. The fun memories are those late nights, early mornings. Mr. Fillmore with rags tied around his head, painting, you know, people running up and down the hall with a broom, just plain silliness. Very fond memories are our own children being raised here. Our kids came with us every night. They worked till the wee hours of the morning, or they slept in the hallways. the wonderful things are the people that God places in your life.
We started with about, I don't know, 90 kids, and I know Mrs. O and I taught junior high, and she taught 1 hour and I taught the other hour, and they went back and forth from her to me, and we just covered everything. I had no vision for it to be huge. We were just going one day at a time. We always did.
Long days, but it was worth it. We were doing something important. Yeah, it was a lot of work and a lot of hours, but it was for a purpose, and the Lord knew it was for a purpose, and so I'm glad we did it. It wasn't easy, no, but it was what the Lord wanted us to do, so that's what we did. So I became more of a fixed part of the project.
We just got a bunch of paint and we started painting, and we painted and we painted, and I can remember there was a young man that worked for my husband at the time that came to help paint, and he didn't believe anything that we were doing. He wasn't a Christian, and he said, as we were painting, he said, "If this school is here in 10 years, I'll believe it's of the Lord." And so here we are today. You know, for a non-believer, it was just kind of unreal, because we just came into a building that was dirty and run down, and God made it into something beautiful.
So we came in, we painted, we put desks in, we did all that, and we finally got the occupancy permit just before we opened. We spent all night getting things ready, and so we ended up starting in September, which I kind of really wish we'd say it was September from year after year instead of going like we do now so early. And that's kind of how CCS got started. Was just a group of people, and 5 of us families that were together, that had been together from 1980 on, that had a dream God put in our heart.
Very small, lots of great memories, it felt like a lot of desks and chairs and hobbled together things from that they just gathered wherever they could. I have lots of memories of parents, not just the teachers, but a lot of parents up at the school working, painting. We were in just a very small part of I guess what's now the elementary school. We had a very kind of small sliver of it.
We had a lot of extra classrooms. Small, I mean, as far as student-wise. Anything that we, like bulletin board items, we made ourselves with the opaque projector. There were no such things as store-bought bulletin boards. You know, coloring, cutting out. Things were simple because there wasn't the money. We began the year knowing that we may not even get a paycheck. But that's how dedicated we were and willing, that God provided. God provided.
Such a great experience to know that we didn't have to go to the store to buy everything new, that we could buy used things and make them, and God provided people to help fix those things up. Mrs. McDaniel was amazing at repairing old equipment. She had a gift for mechanical things to fix things. He provided people that could do electrical, could paint, knew what paint to use and how to do it. It was wonderful to see how God worked all that out, and we all worked together.
Some special things about the first year when we began the first year of the school. At 10 o'clock each morning, all the students, all 75, and all the teachers, we stopped, we knelt beside our desks, and we asked the Lord to provide. And He's been so faithful. So that first year was a blessing, and when the students returned from that class, they say, "Miss O, do you remember praying every morning?" Yes, we do. when the school began, it was a lot of fun and it was a lot of work, but we did all the maintenance, we did all the cleaning. We took turns preparing the lunches for the kids.
We took turns the first year doing bathroom duty, cleaning. We all cleaned the whole school. We would take a week, and it would be my week to clean the restrooms, and another teacher's another week. So we just shared the responsibility, and we were so thankful to have that school, and still are to this day. Every time when school starts every year, I thank God that He has allowed me, after 37 years, to still be a part of this. And because it's not my school, it's His school, and it's His work. And the number of students that have got to experience what God started here is such a blessing.
If we needed to help serve lunches, they would jump in and do that. The yearbook, we've talked about, we just spread pictures out on the table, and the yearbook was done in a few hours. If we needed to clean restrooms and vacuum halls or whatever, we did that because we didn't have someone to come in and do that for us. So, over the years, every time God provides something new, like a janitor or a mechanic or whatever, it's just another way of seeing God's faithfulness. In the beginning, it was just a bunch of women. We didn't have men up here, and so the women would haul desks around and move furniture and do all of the manual labor. So when men was added to the school, that was a blessing, because now they get to do all of that stuff for us. So God's just been so faithful.
Fast forward, after a couple of years, well, I guess it was about a year and a half later, we were able to pay back all loans. We called our friend in Kansas and said we would like to meet you and pay you back. And we met him again at McDonald's, and we had a check plus interest and gave it to him. At that time, we asked him, did you ever wonder if you would get your money back? And his reply was, if I did, I did, and if I didn't, it was no big deal. So that was a tremendous blessing. We have watched the hand of God since day one. He's always been faithful. We've always operated in the black. We've never been in debt where we could not pay our debts. We've watched the Lord provide the money. Then we bought another third of the building, and then eventually we bought all of the building that the elementary is housed in. And each year, growth has taken place, and now we're at the point of over 900 students. Well, we began to grow, and so we purchased the next section of that, and that was the gymnastic chalet. And so once again, we went through the process of buying that. At that time, we could afford it. Had to have much work done on it. Well, we had to redo it all. It was pits, it was ball, it was a gymnastic place. And they did not own it, they were just leasing it. So we started our journey through the summer, and that was labor done free. Every night we all came together. We paid for very little. I know that we worked day and night.
Every night, the teachers and their husbands, and they'd drag their kids, and we would all go there, and we would hang drywall, and we would hang ceiling tiles and bulletin boards, and all the men did the electrical and the plumbing, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that middle school. But yet God blessed, and He continues to do it because we honor Him.
And of course, one of our famous stories is the night before school was to begin, they were still working. We were putting in ceiling tiles. And this is the ladies, it was the children, it was the husbands, it was the board members, it was anybody that could breathe. And there again, we brought our sandwiches and came to work. But the night before, we worked until after midnight. I walked into the teachers' meeting the next morning, and we got our occupancy permit just before school started at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I announced that we'd gotten our occupancy permit, and then I broke down and started crying. I was so tired. We were exhausted from all that we had done. But it was happy tears, and so we celebrated that. And then later, we had the opportunity to buy the last third of the building. That had been used for OU geological samples, and so it was where our gym is now, and it's where our chapel was. It had dirt floors in there, there was glass, there was everything under the sun that had never been cleaned out. So we called for a work night. We all got on our knee pads and we got on our hands and knees and we crawled across the gym, across the dirt. And we picked up glass, we picked up metal, we picked up anything that was there. So we cleaned that whole area, and then we began to go in and make improvements, and that's where our gym came from, and eventually our chapel. Then we grew so large that we didn't have space again, God's blessings, and so we put partitions up on the stage. We had a class up on the stage. I think we had 4 classrooms in the auditorium part. And then we added the upstairs over the gym. And we got acquainted with the people where we own this property, where our building stands now for our high school. We had met them when we first opened the school. And they allowed us to use the property between us and them as a playground. And they gave us they told us if they ever decided to sell, that they would come to us first. And we said, thank you. And they were older gentlemen, and they would stand out and watch the kids on the playground and all that. So they did contact me, and I think that was probably, I'm not real good with dates, but probably about 8 years or so ago. And they said they're going to sell, they're going to retire. So I met with them and asked, what the conditions were, all that. And the price was just way more. And I looked at them and I said, you're so kind and I appreciate it, but we don't have the money. And if we did have them, we wouldn't be able to remodel it and to redo it. So I thanked them, and they were gracious. And I went back over to the school building, and they continued. A few months later, they called and said they had aspired to do great things with the millions they were going to get. But they said, we were standing and watching the kids play on the playground, and said the Lord spoke very clearly and said, if you want to make an impact, invest in children. So they said, Miss O, we're ready to meet, and we want to get you in touch with our realtor, and you talk and you make an offer. And I said, okay. So I got a hold of the board, got a hold of the real estate person that day. I'm not one to let grass grow. It's like, if you need to do it, get it done. And by the end of that day, we had made an offer. They accepted that offer. Within a week, we had written them a check for cash. We had that much money. God knew exactly what we had. And we purchased this property. And they were very happy. When we did the dedication, we invited them back to be a part of the ministry here. And now you can see the beautiful building God has provided for us. And I'll say again, it's all debt free. One of our board members was a real estate person, and I love and appreciate David Bell very much. He was on our board he was our athletic director, but he had sold that property, 21 acres down there, well, that and the property behind it, to a gentleman. And you can say for some reason, all of a sudden, Mr. Bell was contacted, and this gentleman wanted to sell that 21 acres. He said he didn't need that interstate frontage, which is just unreal. And so we said, okay, what would be your asking price? And he asked $5,000 an acre for 21 acres down there. And I said, we'll take it. And so that's how we came upon that property. And so we bought that, and then we started, we needed to improve it and all.
The teachers would go out and walk the field when it was still a field, and we would pray blessings over it as we walked. And we would do it in the morning, and we would do it in the afternoon on our way to or from school. And it was so neat to see God bring that into fruition.
And the first thing we wanted was a football field. You say, oh, I want a football field. I think that was the first project we began to work on. And I thought you just go down there, use a grader, get it nice and level, put some stripes on it, we're going to play football. And then I began to understand that dirt work was going to be $100,000 and all this. But that was the beginning. And so, and then of course we needed a gym. We had used everyone's gym from the Kansas line to the Texas line. And we would go in and we would clean it up, and we would, it was unreal the things that we walked into. But anyway, so when God allowed us to do the gym, our PTSF ladies visited gyms all over the state and came back with that design. And I always tell them, people will say, this looks like a college gym. And I said, that's because ladies designed it. So, but that's how our beautiful gym came about. And And then the football field, and then of course then our baseball field, softball field, all the rest.
As a founding member, in all honesty, it was always a hope and a dream to get to have an athletic center, but we never dreamed. We would borrow other facilities. We would use the, over at the Reserve Center over there, across the highway, we would use that gym facility. We would use Antioch's church, their facility to practice in. I coached cheerleading for several years. We'd practice outside. We didn't have mats or rooms or mirrors or any of that, and we would just practice wherever we could. If we needed to be on the pavement, we'd be on the pavement.
They were funny. I was a cheerleader coach. That was really funny. I didn't even know what a cheer was, but we got them uniforms and we let them jump around and do all their stuff.
We were just grateful for what we had. We didn't have school vans, but we didn't really have a need for all of that yet. We did have a bus route for a while. I don't remember how many passengers it was. A small bus, very used. It was very unique because it had one spot when you got in that you had to step over because there was a hole in the floor. And so you would cautiously have the kids get on the bus. Mrs. Weimer was our first bus driver. And so we had our routes that if the bus couldn't run, or if it wasn't running, or if it was bad weather and the bus wasn't running, each of the teachers had a route. They'd go pick up students from their home and drive them to school. That was fun. And we did that for, I don't remember, 1 or 2 years, not very long, because the bus didn't last very long. And then we figured out that the parents could bring the children to school without a bus route. We just worked hoping and praying that God would provide. We wanted to make certain the school was able to be run well and not take anything away from the students. So for those of us that taught, it was a calling for us. So while we were very dependent on having a salary, it was God that provided and met our needs.
In the beginning, God. And I go back to that. But you know, even in that first year, we took the tuition and we paid the salaries. Now, it wasn't much, but we paid it. Where we didn't have the money the first year or two was for the summer salaries. And so that, we had to catch up on that after the first probably 2 years, and we caught up on all of that.
The first year, we didn't receive a salary because the school was growing, and that was just a desire that we had to be here and to help get this started. But at the end of that year, we received our full year's pay with interest.
The financial part of it was a challenge at the beginning. I think our salaries the first year that we taught was probably about $5,000. They paid that out through the school year, and at the end of the school year they were out of money, so we didn't get any summer salary. And everybody was okay with that. They just said, well, if the money's not there, we can't do it. The school, 3 years later, paid all that back to those teachers. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was just a picture of God's faithfulness to us, that the school continued to grow so that we could pay that back. There were a lot of financial things that happened to start the school. A friend of the Osfelds that loaned us $30,000 and just said, just use it. And we paid that back 3 or 4 years later and gave that all back. Just God's provision for us. I worked the desk in the summer, and I would sit there all day and nobody would come in, but just hoping for one more person, one more student. That's kind of the way it was at the beginning. Just every single student that came was just a huge blessing in God's faithfulness. He's just taking care of us one step at a time, showed us what to do and where to go.
I believe that my very first paycheck I received was about $200, maybe $250, and that was twice a month. So it was very small.
They never missed a paycheck, though. They always had a paycheck. And there was no pressure there because they had come with the heart attitude that if I don't get paid, you don't worry about it, Miss O. Now, how many people do you know like that? How many businesses do you know like that?
In the finances, it's so easy, to see God's provision over the years. We started out talking about the first year and praying, and there's been things, and now here we are 37 years later. I think our property altogether is valued at somewhere around 28 or 30 million dollars. Everything is debt free. There's money in the bank. That's a lot different than it was at the very beginning. And the teachers got a fairly decent raise this year. The early teachers, you can edit all this out if you want to, but the first year when we were under so much financial stress, Mrs. O had made $18,000 a year at the previous school, and I don't know what the teachers made, but the agreement was that Mrs. O would make $9,000 a year and the teachers would make $7,000 a year that very first year. And remember, we're talking about 1986. But because of the school finances, a little bit into the school year, they lowered the $9,000 to $7,000, and they lowered the teacher $7,000 to $6,000. And they still didn't pay it all during the school year. But like I said, it was all made up. But teachers come and they make a respectable salary now. The facility, we used to refer to the building over there as the ugly gray building on the I-35 service road. We have facilities now that I think are really respectable. Have nothing to be ashamed of as far as facilities. Here at the high school, the football field, the gym, I mean, we don't have anything to be ashamed of as far as facilities. So
I believe the biggest challenge came when Mrs. Osfeld's authority was challenged, and the fact that very few thought that she should not be running a school as a woman.
One of the school board members decided that Mrs. O had to go. I had a school board member call me at home and tell me that Mrs. O was rotten to the core, and I thought I knew her core pretty well, and I didn't think it was all that rotten, but said Mrs. O was rotten to the core and she had to go. And they had a whole bunch of charges against her that they were stupid. I could tell you some of them, but it's all in the past.
At that time, I wasn't on the school board. It was 3 years before I joined the board. And that meeting that evening with some parents that thought they were going to remove her was a very heated meeting. It was very large with the parents, and not that they were in favor of removing Mrs. Osfeld at all, but those that had the voice to make that challenge were making a lot of noise and trying to cause a lot of dissension. And it was very difficult. It was challenging for Mrs. O and for the rest of us, because I knew that God anointed her and that He called her to this position. And you don't challenge, you don't try to remove what God has put in place. And you may cause a lot of problems, but ultimately, God is going to take care of it.
I knew that she was the one that was supposed to be there, and nobody else. I was sure we had the right staff, and those who thought differently needed to go, because it was the Lord's doing, and He put it all together. I told her she couldn't quit until God and I said she could quit.
So it was a time we all grew in our faith, because we had to rely on Him, and we were beginning to see what could happen if God didn't intervene, that it could all crumble and go away that we didn't want it to. So we were pretty adamant that community Christian schools should remain independent of any church, because based on a pastor's whim, the church could change or close. And that's what we did not want. We had experienced that several times, and that's why we felt it should be independent. So one important aspect when the parents look at a school is not only do they want a Christian education and a good quality education, but they want athletics too. They want to participate in that. Obviously, at first, we didn't have quite enough players to make a 1A or 2A school, but we started with what we had, and we began collecting uniforms, used uniforms. Coach Stevens was the first athletic director here at school. He was the first football coach. He was the first basketball coach for the boys.
I was the first everything. The school started in September, and come around about November, they're going, well, you know, we really need to have activities for the kids. Like, they'd like to play basketball and that kind of stuff. We said, can you do anything about it? Because I had, at the other schools, I had done their programs too. So it wasn't anything new for me. I said, sure, we can get it started.
One of the funny things that happened in the first year or two of the school, it might have been the third year, when we got enough boys together we could put 9 on the field. We didn't have any money. We were poor again in that respect, and we couldn't buy football uniforms. So we got together and we had a seamstress, and we made all of the uniforms. Mr. Fillmore, he helped us cut them out. We made them. They were beautiful. They looked beautiful.
So when we were able to have our first football game, I remember Coach Stevens had us playing in some small town, and it was like those students were, I don't want to say released from a youth facility, but they were rough.
And we played the Wacomas Chiefs, and none of us had ever played football. I think I weighed 115, 120 pounds, and I was playing linebacker. And we played the Wacomas Chiefs that had just come down from 11-man to 8-man football. I remember getting off of the bus, seeing an ambulance at this football field, and I was kind of confused, like, why in the world? And I'd never played football in my life, and so I didn't know what I was doing.
It was a big old team, and our boys would run down the field and they would grab at their shirts, and it would rip the shirts.
The parents were concerned about their children and their safety, and those of us that had sewn uniforms all summer were more concerned about, don't tear the jerseys. And so we were hollering that on the sidelines as they chased our guys down the football field.
So, and I turned around to them and yelled at them and said, hey, what about the kids? They're about to get killed here.
We lost 62-0 at halftime, and they called the game. And the run rule at the time was like 45 points, I think, and me and my buddies knew that. And so I remember being in a huddle at the field and kind of saying, hey guys, it's 30-something to nothing. They just have to score one more time, we can go eat pizza. And I think Coach Gale and Coach Stevens heard us, and they didn't like that, obviously, so they talked to the other coach and made us play to 65, and then the game ended at halftime.
There was things like that we dreamed of one day, having a big team and having this and that, and look around you, God's given us all those things. You know, He supplies all of our needs, but He gives us so many of our desires.
Mr. and Mrs. Stevens lived down the street from me, and I would ride my bicycle up to their house, and he had all these football helmets and pads and everything in his garage. And my parents could not, didn't really have the ability to drive me to games and stuff, and so I would always ride, you know, Coach Stevens was my, every game, to and from, I rode with Coach Stevens. And I remember he would bring, there were at least one time he remembered to bring me home and forgot his own son bringing him home. But I have just a lot of families like that.
One of the other funny stories is we were playing high school basketball. We went to Lawton. Went to Lawton to play a basketball game on the way back home. But I was naturally I was a bus driver. I'm the only one that had a CD license and stuff, so I drove everything. We were coming back, and Coach Gale and one of the others looked down at the gear shift. They go, Coach, I think there's a fire down there. I go, what? So I looked down there at the gear shift to look, and sure enough, you could see these little flames shooting out. So I pull over to the side of the road, bail all the kids out. Of course, they're all excited. They think it's fun and all that. We get an extinguisher and get it extinguished out. And then we go, well, now what? We had a couple of parents following us. So one of the parents went to Walmart, got a big chain, hooked up. He had a dually truck, so he hooked up the bus to the dually truck from Chickasha, drug us all the way back to school.
Coach Stevens, I've always described him as the fun coach. So I don't know how much like true skills we were taught, but we always had fun. And I think that contributed to our record overall, not being incredibly dynamic. Coach Gale, serious at practice, but you knew he loved us and cared about us, so that's what I remember. And Coach Gale was my my driver's ed teacher, and I liked both of them immensely. We were horrible. I have said many times before that we looked like the Bad News Bears going out on the court. I forget the name of the league that we were a part of, but they required us to wear sweatpants under our shorts. So we had sweatpants under our thick polyester shorts. And we were just terrible. I mean, that's all there was to it. We had no talent, we had no skill. So basketball we stunk at, and we were worse in football than we were in basketball. So it was rough.
I loved playing for Coach Cox. It's kind of funny. He's coaching my daughter as an assistant coach this year, so I think we're the first mother-daughter coaching situation that's happened, so it's kind of funny. I was not going to walk anywhere near the volleyball program because even back then they were stellar, and I played like one time, so I was like, I'm not even going to attempt it. So I played basketball. We won state my senior year, so that was exciting. And I cheered for 1 year because they were desperate for anyone who could tumble, and I could do that. So, but that was 1 year was good enough for me.
My first year, I taught 4-year-olds. It's been a few years since I've done that. I want to say I had maybe 12, 13 students. And we bought curriculum just for what we thought that we would have that year. When we first bought the building, there was, I think you called it a big toy on the playground. We came back one Monday morning and it wasn't there. And so several of us brought our swing sets, everything, and that was our playground. We had a dad that bought several small trees, little seedlings. Each class took one, planted it, we watered it, prayed for it, and a couple of those trees, we have lost several, but that's why we have trees now. There were no trees on the playground at all. God has always provided what we need.
Just how blessed we have been, and how faithful the Mrs. O, Miss Weimer, Miss Stevens, Miss Fillmore, all those families that started this, how faithful they were in the beginning, and how they planted a lot of seeds, and they didn't know how that tree was going to, spring forward, and it's just been really amazing. And even thinking about like our gymnasium down the street, our basketball where we practiced at was in kind of a corner of that old building. It's hard to explain where, like, you couldn't shoot a three-pointer on the side because the three-point line went into the wall. I mean, it was just very kind of what we needed, at the time. But now, the building we're in, the facilities we have, and frankly, the size of the school. It's because I don't remember, but it seemed like we had about 80 students or something total. Maybe. I'm kind of making that up, but that's kind of what I remember. And seeing all of these students and families, and I suspect this will be years and years after all of these folks have retired, and it will be weird to think that at some point people won't remember, but a lot of the folks that don't remember them, they will get the benefit of, again, their faithfulness back at the beginning. And so that's what I think of, yeah.
My name is Haley Beth Hodges, and I started CCS in 2002. I was in the 3rd grade. Just the growth and just seeing what all God's done for us. We were all in that one building, and there was a big old chapel, and then the chapel shrunk, and then now the chapel's the size it was where I started, and we have a whole new building. And so it's just cool to see how God's just really helped us grow and just all He's provided for us.
Starting out, all of them were small because we were such a small school. When we first began, we only had 2 classes that we could swap around because the campus was so small. So you were either in this class or the other classroom. And I think we only had like 3 or 4 teachers total for the junior high and high school departments. So the classes were small, but I remember it being fun. I never remember thinking, or I don't remember ever thinking, we're small, we're insignificant, we're less than. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Extremely small. We only had 2 hallways, but we still had the shag carpet that was not fun. And we had very small classes. We only had 6 seniors, and we had 15 8th graders. And so very different from the 79 we have now.
It was a lot smaller. It was really fun. We just had a lot of get-togethers. We would have a school picnic and all that kind of stuff. So it was really like a close-knit family at that time. Still is today. But.
The classrooms were pretty much what we have now, except there were no light switches. There was only a main breaker at the back of the cafeteria, so when it came time to leave at night in the dark, you had to flip the breaker and then walk through the hallways to get to the front door to get out. So it was a little different. We didn't have air conditioning in each room, and in the process, we just learned to depend on each other. It was nice. In the early years, it was like a giant family, and everybody knew everybody because we had so few families that were here. You knew all about every part about them, and that was such a blessing. But yet now we have so many kids here, we have a bigger mission field, and I love that. The things that we have that we take for granted every day, things like the ice cream machine and the way that our lunch is handled and everything is so it's upscale, definitely, but so much nicer. Lunches were like going to a concession stand. You had about 15 or 20 choices. You could have nachos, and you could have pretzels with cheese, and you could have burritos, hot dogs, corn dogs, chili dogs. They had salads that they would make ahead of time for you, and the pizzas were actually all made here at CCS. They would get out the pizza shells and all the toppings, and you would just line cafeteria tables with pizza to make enough for all the kids, because we didn't order enough to get a group discount from like Mazzio's or wherever we were going to go. I moved in from the first hallway over into the middle school, and it was still a little rough around the edges. In fact, we had to postpone school starting because we didn't have the occupancy permit, because we hadn't finished building it yet. We were still working on it. And so moving into that one, it was still a little rough around the edges, but it was so nice, and it was big, and it was the biggest room I'd ever had, and I was all excited. And then I went to put my stuff in my cabinets, and I realized that my cabinets had all been, when they put the varathane on it, the varathane had dried to the cabinet, and I couldn't open any of my cabinets. So I couldn't use any of my cabinets. And then I moved to a different room, and I loved it because I could open the door. It was the door that had an outside door. I could open the door, and we would open the door, and we would watch it snow and watch it rain and keep it open for air circulation and stuff. And then one day, out of the blue, in walked a cat, and we just had a cat in my room, and we couldn't get the cat out of the room. But it's been fun moving from place to place. Moving to the new building was a huge change. I felt it felt very big, very sterile, because it wasn't all homey feeling. It was very the brick and the white, and it was very different. And so I used to tease that I'd moved into a truck stop, because it was so sanitary. It was clean, or I don't know what the word is, but it was just so sterile looking. And now I just love it. But at the time, I wasn't so thrilled about it. I love my room now. I love where I'm at. But sometimes I miss the old building, and I miss the feeling that it gave me, because I'd been there for so many years.
As a founding member, in all honesty, no, I did not envision that it would be 2 facilities and an activity center. No way. And now, it was always a hope and a dream to get to have an athletic center, but we never dreamed.
I had no vision for it to be huge. We were just going one day at a time. We always did. And then we bought another part of that building, then we bought another part of that building, then we bought the existing high school building over the years, and just one step at a time. And I don't know how many board meetings I've been in where we've just stopped and marveled and said, look what God's doing.
And we didn't realize there were, so many other people that wanted the same thing, and so it's amazing to see how God's blessed and just to still be a part of that.
No. Well, no, not really. I didn't, not that I knew it wouldn't, it's just that it just gradually came and I just grew with it, Used to, I was the only one doing the maintenance stuff, and whenever I was first coming to work up here, and of course the older I get, the slower I get. But and then I've had several helpers, and now my brother-in-law, which is a big help, and Spence, it was really a blessing to have them with me.
Never dreamed, even when we bought more of the building, never thought that we would have the activity center, an amazing, amazing facility, and then this building, the high school. It's just God has blessed over abundantly.
I tell you how we thought it was by what we were looking at to start with. Remember the house I was telling you about? We're thinking, with a little house like that, we could have a school in. We never dreamed it would be what it is. We were just trying to survive. We just knew that God called us to start a school and to educate kids. So that's what we did. Never in our wildest dream. We were just trying to survive day to day and watching God bless us and and just provide. And He never provided with a large sum of money. It was always all the moms and dads. It's just amazing if you just listen to God. And of course we all question sometimes when He's asking us to do something of why. But if we just trust Him, He's faithful. He's faithful.
It has been just a consistent place where my children can grow up around good kids with good families. I think that one of the things we take for granted about this school is if you send your if your kid's staying the night with someone on the weekend on a Saturday, one of the questions is what kind of church clothes do we need to pack for Sunday? And so I think when being around other good families, not just having the good teachers and the good school, but also the kind of families that send their kids and invest in sending, Christian education, it has been it's been a real blessing. It just reinforces the things that you teach your kids at home. And so it's, we've got, just like me, I feel like our children have gotten an excellent education here. We've got our oldest is graduated from college, and we've got our second who's just killing it, and he's an engineering major at OU in his third year. And I just have a great deal of faith, not just in the curriculum, but also the families that have kind of helped raise our kids with us. And you can call the parent. The other thing about we take for granted, I think you can call a parent if you're having an issue with some other kid, or maybe their kid's having an issue with your kid, and the parents talking to each other and kind of communicating. That's kind of the way it should be, I think. And it's a little old school. I think it's a little kind of a 1950s model of going, but I think our children don't realize how much of a blessing it is to go to school in a safe environment where people actually care about them, where teachers are kind of sometimes maybe feel like they're in their business about what's going on outside of school, but it's because they care about them. And I think my kids have certainly benefited from that, even if at times they don't always see it. Yeah.
Well, when you've given your whole life to something, it means a lot. I remember when I worked out at Tinker Air Force Base, and I was an industrial engineering technician. They were grooming me for a role in leadership out there with a 6-digit salary tied to it. I remember when I told my father that I believe God was calling me to teach. And he told me how disappointed he was in me, that I would give up so much money and opportunity to come and do something that you would make no money. And then the second year of the school, my dad was one of the first ones to help pitch in money to start the school. And the second year, and every year since, while he was alive, he never failed to tell me how proud he was of the steps that we had taken and what we had done. And to me, it was not that I needed to please my father, but I didn't have him while I was growing up. He wasn't in my life. And so to have that approval from him meant the world to me. I knew that God was pleased with what we'd done because he'd ordained it. But to know that my dad was proud meant a lot. God has been everything to my family. It's provided an opportunity for my husband to do what he loves to do, and that's coach. It has provided my children with a fantastic, solid education, grounded in the Word that they haven't forgotten. And they still, I remember when my daughter was getting ready to graduate and she just took one last walk around the hallways. And of course it was when we just had the one building. And she said, Mom, I didn't realize all the scriptures on the walls, how important this school is and how important that word is in my life. So it has meant everything to us. I can't imagine being somewhere else.
It's kind of my whole life. It's just kind of the faithfulness he's provided for us. Mr. O changed jobs. God blessed. My boys have been taught the ministry. I have one that's in full-time ministry. I have another one that loves the Lord and serves Him. I feel like my family has been blessed because they have been able to see the fruit of the Lord and how faithful He has been, to trust Him. And my faith has grown so much, it's been unreal, because we knew that we didn't have that power within ourselves. So how has my family been blessed? I can't even begin to tell you, but it has been. So
a lot of family come through, and it's always been a blessing to all of them and to us, and to see them come through different stages of life here at CCS. And I wasn't always involved in everything they did, but but gradually, when I became more of a maintenance man and actually worked on buildings and that kind of stuff, then so I became more of a fixed part of the project.
Strength, friendship, someone to pray with, someone that can pray with me. In my own personal life, CCS has been, like I said, it's helped me to get through a lot of things in my personal life.
Probably the biggest blessing was to be able to teach and coach your own kids. We never wanted for anything. God always provided whatever we needed. We didn't have our wants, because nobody does, but he was just faithful to us. Just faithful to furnish everything that we needed. And also the kids get a great education. My daughter was the first National Merit Scholar we had, so the quality of teaching and stuff's always been excellent.
How has God been faithful? Like in every way. I know it sounds generic, but truly, I don't know what salaries were 35 years ago. I don't know what the pay structure was, but as a kid, I never thought, oh, we're poor because my mom works at a new school and I don't even know what my dad was doing 35 years ago. I never sensed anything different, So when Mom went from one school to this endeavor, when my dad refused to transfer, our lives never changed. So if things were tight 35 years ago, I didn't know about it. Faithful we've never missed anything. We've never gone without anything. So I don't know a better definition of faithful than to look back and go, it's been pretty good.
My family personally, there have been times that money wasn't there. And because I have a family here that prays and knows, I have found envelopes of money in my mailbox that were exactly what I needed to pay a bill I couldn't have the money for. They have reached out to my family so many times, in times that I didn't even know I was going to have the need, but God did. My house was built by Habitat for Humanity, and the entire basketball team came down and would work it on Saturdays when they had time. It's been amazing how God has done this, and it is all for Him. And I want Him to get the glory for it because He's the one who's worthy.
And just learn more about God, and just from going from a public school standpoint to a private school, just being able to learn and just learn about God throughout everything, and just actually have the teachers care about what you are doing and just care about you as a person. It's just a great blessing for my family. And having my mom here has been a great blessing also, just throughout my elementary years, just having her around and just providing for us.
I think just my kids being here, I have the artistic ability, and it's always kind of hard because you never know how, whenever you are gifted with something from God, how He's going to use your skill set. And I feel like by me being here, that's the reason why I have it. And so I'm able to be here in this environment, and my kids are here, and I know they're safe, and I know their teachers love them. And so I feel like it just all kind of works together and connects together. And like I said, I definitely think it's a God thing that I'm here in the first place. And so I just know it's right, I guess.
It's a ministry, My son graduated here. Of course, we've been here since it started. It's something that's just I'm part of a family, I guess. It's just, I don't know. I just, when I'm not here, if I ever get a vacation to go away, I guess I'm always thinking, about what this has been our life, and someday there'll have to be somebody else that's going to have to take that, that's the good thing that somebody needs to look at, as far as people coming up, it's good to start something and be encouraged where it's going to go as far as godly directions and stuff. You always want to look for somebody that wants to invest their life, and not just for a paycheck, but so that's the way it's been with us. We've invested just about however many years since '86. And so it's just been an investment, hoping that, someday there'll be somebody else younger that'll come along, because, the older we get, things just don't go as fast. And I'm still trying to think of things, fast, but and I still like to figure stuff out, but it just gets, you're waiting for the next young generation to come up. You know, it's a blessing, you know, it really is. A lot of personal challenges, you know, people, you know, didn't agree with some of the things or wanted to change stuff than what it was originally started like. I guess you'd say some kind of like the government deal, but the Lord always, we had principles that were in place, and I believe they were kept, and the ones who didn't try to disrupt or change things and cause trouble, they were gone.
Well, as I said, the first year we knew that there might not be a paycheck, but God met our needs. It may seem trivial, but if you wanted to turn the lights on or off at the beginning or the end of the day, you couldn't just flip your switch. You had to go down to the end of the hall into a breaker room and flip the breaker. And when it was flipped, it got dark. It got really dark. So at 10 o'clock every morning, that first year, that breaker was flipped. Everybody was on their knees and we were praying for God's provision. He provided.
Well, there's so many. Where do you start? You know, it's just, you just think whether it's teachers that don't, you know, that quit, or whether it's people that get sick, or what, God's always provided whatever we need. Even though we might panic, we might think, well, great, now what? We've had board issues. We've had the board wanting to get rid of Barbara at one time because they didn't think a woman should be in charge of the school, and just stuff like that God stepped in. He just lets us know that he's boss, and it's his school.
Yeah, yeah, I do. But I mean, that's part of dealing with people. Yeah, and I know that from her perspective, it would have been worse than I would have realized. I remember, you know, I don't know how old the school was, but there was, as I remember it, kind of an uprising with some board members. But as a kid, I just wanted to go out and play basketball with my friends, you know, that lived across the street. I'm not really worried about all those dynamics. I remember it, but you know, but as a school grew, you can't help but have personnel issues that you hear about at the supper table every once in a while, or discipline issues. But I mean, you know, they were dealt with, and you go on, and that's life.
Personal challenges for me, my biggest one would have been my divorce, and having to raise 2 kids by yourself. But God sent me a family at CCS, and that family helped raise my kids, and they're doing the same with my grandkids. And it's such a blessing to see God do that. I'm so thankful, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. I think the biggest struggle, and I came the last year, for so many years they had prayed every day at 10 o'clock, and I came in on the end of that. And that was so cool to see that as a corporately, we were praying for God to bless the school, and God did, and the kids were able to see that. But I just think it's neat that God has taken us through so much, things that people wouldn't even know about or have any concept that was going on. People truly who were irritated or mad at the school, and desired bad for the school, yet God protected every time. And I think it's neat. As far as struggles go, we have always been very frugal with our money, so that we were always able to do what we needed to do. But there have been times that we needed, and we just called out, and as soon as we did, it would just show up. We have great parents. Our parents are fantastic. They found out that we wanted to do a Blue Point, and they immediately wanted to help with that. When we do jog-a-thon or when we do candy things, we're doing those because we have a need and we would like to take care of that without going in debt. And God always provides. Fall Festival the same exact way.
For sure. You know, we live in a world that is kind of gone crazy, it feels like at times. And where I was at a lawyer conference a month ago in another state, and we had some speakers on religious liberty, some professors from different law schools. And one of them made the comment that the well-funded Christian organizations that are filing lawsuits challenging, kind of standing up for themselves about their, whether it, some controversial religious topic, or, they basically trying to protect their religious freedom. One of the professors made the comment that it is one of the greatest threats to our country. And so when you think about the perspective of the world at times, where this is, it really is kind of a light in our community. There's a lot of people that at times want to harm the school in ways. And so I think the fact that the school has been protected, that we have, the school has been faithful, but also provides a safe place for children to go to school, and also can stand up for simple things like the right to use the men's restroom instead of the women's restroom. I mean, little things that again, a lot of people I think don't see. It's an environment where we can kind of be safe and peaceful and not dealing with some of the crazy that goes on outside of the school. Yeah.
Well, I think I think the board, God has always placed the board with just exactly who He wants there. But I think physically, I know there's a great demand for private education. Of course, my emphasis is on Christian education. But I think, what do I see? I think that the Lord will let us know, the board and me, when it's time to stretch our boundaries. He will show us the place, and He will give us the finances to do that. I think right now we're to be still until He shows us how to move. But I'm not opposed to increasing the size of CCS. But I don't want to do it just because out of pride, well, look how big we can grow, look what we can do. Has nothing to do with that. And I'm studying Daniel right now, and I certainly don't want to get ahead of the Lord and become prideful. So I think physically, I think the board is waiting, and I think that administration is waiting just to see. He'll show us.
Yeah, just to see the growth that God's provided for us. We were all in that one building, and just to see the chapel shrink and then just grow back, and then us get the new building, just how God's provided in everything, and just how we've been able to grow.
A lot of the kids that I coach are now old and bald-headed, but we still have a great relationship with each other over the years. It's more like family than anything.
Just worship God and just share godly principles, and just what God's done in my life with the students is a huge blessing, because I have come from that side to this side, from the student perspective to the teacher perspective, and just being able to pour into the students like the teachers poured into me is just the biggest thing for me, because I had all the teachers pour into me, but there were those select few that just poured into me more than others, and they just made a huge impact on my life. And so I want to be that impact in other people's lives. So.
What would you say to students right now going to school?
I know it's rough sometimes, and you think that there's too many rules and everything else, but it really is for the best, for your benefit, and just you will come out and just appreciating it, because it's prepared you for the life that you're headed towards, and just your workplace and everything else. So.
Probably just the fact that in 34 years, I have come across so many children, and some are not here anymore because they've passed as adults. And the one thing I really want to share is that I want them to know Jesus. If I had one last breath, it would be, you need to know Jesus, because He is the only way The only way.
That we stay the course, that we keep the standards that we got and not deviate from them, and not worry about what man thinks or what the government thinks, but do what we're supposed to do.
That's why I said I hope, you know, when Mrs. Osfeld does retire, that someone with her standards, her convictions, will be able to take her place. If not, it won't be CCS. It might be called CCS, but it will not be what we know it as. And that will be heartbreaking.
Yeah, maybe someday God will do that, give us a place to start a middle school, and that elementary can continue to grow, and the rest of the school can continue to grow, and that God just continues to send teachers and leaders to carry on what was started.
My hope for CCS is that we'll continue to be strong and stand on the principles of God's Word, that if someday we are not here, that whoever God puts in charge will not compromise and will hold fast to the principles that the school was founded on and to His Word. And as they do that, then God will provide, not to try to keep up with the world, not to provide what the world provides, but to provide exactly what God wants us to. And that He would lay on the hearts of the teachers that this is a gift and that we need to take care of it as though it were our own, but to work and be willing to go above and beyond, not because it's a job, but because it's a calling.
This is God's school, and it should go forward. It should move forward. There should be, I mean, I hope I'll be missed for a week or two, you know, but I agree with the study in Ecclesiastes. You know, there's a purpose for your life, and when God's finished with it, then He moves you to the next level. But I would hope it doesn't miss a beat. I want it to just go forward, and if it's His, it will. If it's mine, I'll destroy it. So I feel perfectly content with that.
That they'll maintain strength of character, discipline, and following God every step of the way. When I'm not here, or the rest of us that started this are not here, we don't know what the pressures will be against the school at that time. But I pray that God raises up leaders that have a commitment to follow God in the pattern that's been set, and even go beyond what we did and trust God and to do what He's called us to do. Knowing God, knowing His Word, and living a disciplined lifestyle. That's the pattern that's given to us in Scripture. And that those that go along after us will continue that. Just that I'm thankful that God allowed me to be a part of all this. I have no idea why. It's been a huge, huge part of our lives for years. How many years have I been here? I don't know, 30-some years. It's just, why did God let me do this? I don't know. But I'm very, very thankful. And I pray that God gives the school strength to go on for a long time.